Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, Season 7, Episode 1. This is the Voxel Mesher launch party. I'm Chris Schmidt. How is everybody doing? Welcome on Twitch, on YouTube. First of all, can you see me? Second of all, can you hear me? How is the audio level? I did not do any tests because I kind of went and set up this live stream, and then I got all the links and everything ready, and it's like, oh, no, I didn't actually test to make sure all the tech was working. So hopefully it is. It seemed to be. I'm hopeful, but we got to give everybody a second. So, Mr. Shredder, welcome. Yes, and yes. Excellent. Excellent to hear. Good to have everyone here hanging out. So, thank you, everybody. Now, the plan today is to do the Voxel Mesher launch party. Now, it did launch over a week ago, but then I had to leave for NAB right away, and we didn't get to do a proper launch party. And it's just been really busy over here getting the presentations all put together for Maxon. Hopefully those are going to become available to everybody very soon. They were supposed to come out, honestly, they're supposed to come out like a week ago, but hopefully they're going to come out soon. I'm kind of delaying the end of the sale because I talked about the sale in those videos, but they did not live stream this year, and the editing is taking longer than expected. So anyway, the focus today will be all about Voxel Mesher. We can kind of bounce around and maybe tie it in some different ways. For the most part, I want to try and respond to people's questions. Of course, I can demo some basics, but and I'm trying to think. I mean, lots of things have happened. Obviously, the launch of Voxel Mesher being super huge. NAB was really cool. We had a big successful half res back in the fall, which was really exciting. And I've got some fun plans coming up, maybe with EJ and Windbush. So that could be very exciting. That'll be later in the year. And let's see, I've got other plans. I think I might be focusing a lot more on Patreon in the near future, which is exciting. Something we're not really, well, actually, we probably will talk about it a little bit today. But some of the big news, and I know there's some confusion around this, but some big news is that the Rocket Lasso tools that we were making for Maxon, not the Rocket Lasso plugins, but the node-based capsules that we were making for Maxon that were all Maxon 1 exclusives, are now just C4D subscriptions. So essentially, if you have an up-to-date version of Cinema, you should get access to almost all of the Rocket Lasso capsules, which is very exciting. That means I can talk about them a lot more because there were people who would always get upset that they didn't get access to them. And yeah, anyway, I'm not going to get into more detail on the specifics there, but I am excited to see them in the vanilla version of Cinema 4D. So I do believe that I'm going to play the trailer for the Voxel Mesher. I imagine a lot of you have seen it, but maybe some people haven't. And if you have questions about specific things in the trailer or maybe things it can do, and I can just start doing a little overview of it. But I do want to be responding to questions as we go. And Lignazio, I just want to say thank you again for subscribing on the Twitch stream. That's always appreciated. All donations and subscriptions are deeply appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so I've got this all set up. Let me click the proper button here, and I'm just going to let this play out. And I'm back. Anyway, hopefully everybody saw that. That is a little overview of the Voxel Mesher tool, some of the animations I put together. They were all really fun to put together. I always love using our tools to make cool animations because, typically I'm not doing a lot of rendering. So it's one time I get to kind of stretch those muscles a little bit. And then one really exciting thing is you saw that there was that one piece in there, the Bill Nye Lego animation that was put together by Henchman. More specifically, Mike the Monkey is part of that team or worked on the project. So it's very exciting that one of the beta testers was able to use it in production with a Lego with Bill Nye. So a lot of fun combinations there. That was really exciting. I got a missing frame in the dancing worker. Was there a blank frame in there? I didn't even catch it at any point. Anyway, I put links in there for the discount code for the current version of Voxel Mesher. We will be ending that code. I mean, not today, probably on Friday. So time is running out. But I did want to mention that if you are supporting on Patreon, I'm going to copy this. If you're supporting on Patreon, I'll put this in the notes as well. Then you can go to this post, and I'm not sure how much you can see it. But if you are supporting a Patreon, and I forget which levels this shows at, but even at some relatively low tiers, I think if you're at $5 or above on Patreon, there is just for the sale week, you can actually get $25 off of it, which is actually, pretty much it's more than 25% off. So it's like the biggest discount you can get. And that was just a thank you to everybody who's still supporting on Patreon, which is always super appreciated. Turn off audio. Okay, we can jump around. Okay, so we're going to dive into Thunder Godling. People like you are the reason I have a checklist before I start a stream where it's like one of my things is make sure there's no secrets in the sidebar. And I was like, oh, do I care about that? And it's like, nah, that can stay there. Yeah, the Dragon Hoarders is just a board game I was playing with, just like a hobby project. But yeah, you saw that in my little side menu here. So I want to talk a little bit about the basics of Voxel Mesher, and it's a really fun tool. We actually teased this a while ago, but then back then it was a very, very simple tool, and we kept on adding more features to it. Now, the super basic workflow, a lot of you are probably very familiar, of course, with the basic volume builder workflow. So I'm going to make a text object, set that to be in the middle. I usually like popping this to some beefier font like Arial Black, just a little bit beefier. And yeah, now we've got some text, and then you would throw this into a volume builder, and you put that, this is now it's calculating all the voxels essentially. But then the only way that Cinema lets you really interact with these is putting this into a volume mesher. And once you put that inside, it's going to take those, essentially, it's like, is it here or is it not here? And it's going to feed it into this mesher right here. You click on your builder, you can change things like your voxel size. This is something that everybody's probably been familiar with for years. So our goal was to piggyback off this exact same process. So now I can take this text object, drop it inside of a volume builder, and instead of putting it inside of a volume mesher, I can now go to the extensions dropdown where I've installed. There's a spoiler in there. I thought I turned it off. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to close Cinema and open it. There's we're working on another little plugin, which was supposed to be hidden from that menu, which I did hide, but I didn't close Cinema and reopen it again. So it was still preloaded. So anyway, little spoiler for people who were paying super close attention. Let Cinema pop right back open again, close it, and we'll just make the text again. Okay, text. Let's type in Arcade T. Let's change this to Lemon Milk, which to my untrained eye is a really fun font. Okay, cool. So we got that. So back to the workflow, drop it into a volume builder, just like we normally would. But now under extensions, I can click on Voxel Mesher. So if I hold down Alt and click it, now instead of getting that kind of smoothed out version, we're now just seeing the final actual shell of it as voxels. So the basic idea is we can now return this as this outer shell. And I'm going to change one setting here just so it will demonstrate cleanly, and I'll explain what I did later. So we're going to do that. Okay, so here we have this volume. So if I fly inside of it, you're going to see that this is completely hollow. It's just the outermost shell looking, all cubey. Then we can switch this to cube mode instead, which visually looks pretty much identical. But you'll see if I say rescale and make the geometry smaller, these are each individually little cubes. If this was in shell mode, you see it's just the outermost shell that is scaling down. So in cube mode, if I zoom in, you can actually see we have this full volume of cubes traveling through the entire thing. Let's turn off that rescale geometry. I'll go to polygon mode, and you'll see here I'm getting these flat sheets of polygons. Essentially, instead of the center point being a cube, the center point is now a singular polygon. I'll turn on SSAO just so we can see the shadows in there a little bit and get these fun layers. And we can change the orientation of those. So we can aim it on Z or on X and layer those up in multiple fun ways. Just trying to give users options. And the last main mode is we have point mode, and this will return a point cloud of our object, which we'll be getting into a whole bunch as we go. Now, cube mode is kind of the one I think is most fun. It's definitely what you think of when you think of voxels. So we'll put a cube and we'll put a little space in between the range. And the volume builder has this as well, is there's kind of like this cloud of points around the entire thing. And this is showing us how many, it's like, well, where in that threshold do we want to actually generate geometry? So just like volume builder, we are seeing that. Now, the Voxel Mesher is built to work pretty much in all the exact same ways that the volume builder is. So things like Pyro and VDBs, those should just be working in there directly. And of course, all the other things that you can expect from a volume builder work here as well, where you can create a sphere, drop that in as well. And now we can scoot that around. And now those are actually getting merged into a singular object, seeing the entire form. And all of the volume builder things like subtracting the shape instead, taking a bite out of it, like all of that can be propagated all the way through. So keep in mind all the different ways that those fun things do combine. Grabbing this text, I'll make the text even a little bit deeper. Let's grab our volume builder, and I'm going to, if we want to change the resolution, we actually change the voxel size. So not in the Voxel Mesher, but in the volume builder. So I'll drop this down to 5, and keep in mind that's not just, if we cut it in half, it's not times 2, it's times 2 on X and Y and Z. So it's cubed. So there's a lot more cubes right now. And again, if I zoom in, you're actually going to see that we are getting all these cubes filling up the void. Now, I'll talk more about that in detail, but one thing I wanted to point out is if I actually, there's a setting. If you go under advanced, there's a visualize voxels checkbox. So if I say display, we're actually going to get this little preview, these dots showing how many voxel points are being calculated and returned. And for the most part, that is showing where your range threshold can travel. That's as far out or as far in as I can go. Now, just as on a technical side, there's a thing that I think a lot of people don't know, and I certainly didn't know it, is the volume builder. When you twirl this down, there's all these additional settings. And the important ones to us are the interior voxel range and the exterior voxel range. So what exactly is that doing? Well, by default, it's 2, 2. And you'll see if I select my voxel mesher that we're seeing that we get these outer dots and we get these inner dots. But those inner dots only step in so far from the surface. And you might remember from live streams like 2 or 3 years ago, I was always confused at the behavior of the volume builders. Like, why is there a volume inside of it? Why is there like an inner wall? Well, this was the reason. It was because we weren't telling it to calculate more voxels in. So yeah, right now, if I were to look at this from the side, based on the original, you'll see that after we go 2 steps in, and remember interior range of 2, you see that it is now hollow. But if I zoom in a little bit more, let's grab the volume builder and I start increasing the interior voxel range. It's going to step in, step in, step in. And you have to do that as many times as your object is thick if you want to fill out the entire volume. Now, having said that, we do have this handy dandy checkbox. Actually, I want to turn off this cross section that I'm seeing of those dots. But if you want to, you can just double click on the icon and that will turn on or off that visualize. So super handy. So let's go ahead and, there's the checkbox I wanted to mention, is this hollow object checkbox. And so if I turn that on, no matter what, it's going to make this perfect outer shell here. So now there's exactly one layer everywhere, and then we can see the interior. So super duper handy. Let's leave that turned off though. And what I wanted to do is let's get rid of the rescale geometry and just show you can also layer in fields as well, which is a normal volume thing, but I think it's pretty cool looking. So let's make this text a little bit thicker, push that back further. And now we make a volume, or I'm sorry, rather a field. I'll make a random field, drop that inside of the volume builder. And just as, you probably tinkered with this type of thing, but you can now see it's getting visualized. And in the volume builder, the basic setup here is when you drop a field in, it is making a creation space. So we could type in a custom kind of box that is going to generate, but you can change that creation space to objects below. And now this is only appearing where the object below it was. So if I were to set this to subtract, and then we grab our random field and I start increasing the scale of that, then now we can start visualizing an entire cloud of noise only where it's intersecting our text. But of course, now instead of it being a big blob, we're now getting those individual voxels. So yeah, very powerful, a fun way of combining these. And of course, these are additive. You can layer and layer and layer as many things you want. We could go into the volume builder and add a smooth on top of that and limit how much smoothing there is and start rounding these out a little bit. Of course, they're still cubes, but now those are rounded out on their corners. So all of the regular volume builder workflow just works automatically. We are just built on top of it. Yes, very Minecraft. What's really funny is I've had people comment to that. It's like, oh, you had perfect timing. You timed it with the Minecraft movie. And don't get me wrong, I love Minecraft. I play probably too much Minecraft. I haven't seen the movie, but I did not time it for that at all. But yeah, we do get our voxels here. And yeah, instant world generation there, which can be pretty fun. Of course, you're seeing here everything's parametric. I can, type in voxel, and this will propagate through the system. And now we see the word voxel overlaid with this noise. Grab the noise and change the scaling of that, perhaps make that a little bit smaller. And we could stretch it out on Y. So it's like really, really tall noise, making these vertical stripes cutting through it. So that can be pretty fun. Delete that. We've got our overall volume here. Now, what are just some other cool features that we have? Well, I mean, I guess there's kind of the main one that I want to talk about. And that is the ability of the Voxel Mesher to play really, really, really nicely with the cloner, essentially with the Mograph system inside of Cinema. So you saw that we had this point cloud option. So this is perfect for a cloner, but we didn't want users to have to manually make a cloner and make all this stuff perfectly. So we always have this button that says convert to cloner. So if I say convert to cloner with a single click, it is now changed Voxel Mesher to being in point mode. It created a cloner. It is now set to multi-instance. It's cloning onto the vertexes, and it automatically made a cube that is equaling the volume or the voxel size in there. So now that I've done that, I can do things like make a random effector. So cloner selected, make a random effector, and let's give that a linear field here. And now there we go, like super fast. On top of that, we're now making a multi-instance based on the volume, complete control, maximizing the speed. The cloner, the old workflows on this were a lot of like grabbing the cloner and like erasing out making a giant grid of clones and erasing out everything that wasn't relevant. Well, here, like we can bypass all of those steps, and we are only focused on exactly like the points that we would be seeing. And all this propagates again straight through the system. So I can grab this and type in the word mesh and let it refresh. And you see it updates the cloner, updates right through this effector, passing right through it. So, tons and tons of power there. And of course, that is now enabling us to do things like colorize these. So let's also turn on a color remap. I'll set the color remap to be gradient. This random is not outputting color. So I'll go to parameter. The color mode will be based on the field color. And now you can see that they're randomly moving, but they're getting colorized in a linear way just based on the field. So I can go to my color remap, load a gradient, and we can load any of these in or some of my custom presets here and just get any colors on there that I like and just pass it right on through. And now we're just colorizing those clones trivially, which is really fun. Are there fragments located inside the corner of the K from spline interpolations? Oh, the fragment. They are, yeah, are fragments located on the corner of the K. So we kind of moved away from the specific setup that you might be referring to, but let's go and simplify, and I'm sure we can see these. So let's go back to cube mode and let's get rid of some of that smoothing. So we get these sharp edges. So you are going to see in the world of volumes that something like this text object is going to have these in the corner, and that's just going to be based on the incoming shape, where it's like this is somewhere kind of in between the points of the voxel. So if I make the volume builder, these ones in this corner, actually you can kind of see this clearly here. You see how these almost look dark gray and these look light gray, but this one in the corner is kind of a medium gray in between the two, and it's just catching thresholds at different places based on that information. Now if you to put that into a volume mesher, then yeah, you see that these voxels are being created in the corner, but you also see that that's tapered in a little bit. So essentially we're interpreting that exact same information. So yeah, that's just a threshold of like being careful where you've placed your text, etc. So deleting out the volume mesher, reactivate this. If I grab my text object and I scoot it forward or backward or off the side a little bit, you're going to see we're kind of passing through a cloud of noise. And depending on the position and the scale and the resolution, then those are just going to catch differently. Okay, selecting our voxel mesher. Let's talk about additional settings here. You saw we have this resized geometry, so I can start shrinking these down. We can do that on any of these modes except for point, shrink them down. And we've also got let's reset that. We also have a scale field here. So directly here inside of the voxel mesher, you can do some cloner-esque things. So in this case, if I let's make a spherical field. So say spherical field. And now you can see that we are actually shrinking down based on the spherical field falling through. So that's pretty cool. But then here's what's cool is we actually we counteract the math. So if you say convert that to a cloner, boop, you'll see the cloner looks exactly the same. And you'll now see that the cloner is coming along with a plane dot scale, and we're actually feeding in that same spherical field to make sure that it looks identical. So everything just translates 1-to-1 directly over. Back to cube mode. Let's not scale those. And sorry, there's like a little fruit fly flying around. He's driving me crazy. Where did this come from? Okay, so next up, well, we've got like different rigs and things that we can play with. You've seen the basics of what this does. We got things like the feedback being fed back through. So we've got like different dimensions here. This is telling you exactly how many voxels across it is, how many tall, how many deep. We've got UV mapping. Let's see. We need to make a material here. So I'm going to go into I think under media, search for the word UV. And if I scroll all the way down, yeah, there's this really handy UV test grid. So I'll grab that, drop it there. That just makes a material. Cool. Drop that on the voxel mesher. Oh yeah, and I have to turn off reflection because the reflection makes it not show up, on objects in the viewport. Okay, cool. So by default, we've got this per polygon UV mapping. So you can see that the material is mapped on every single one of them, but you can change that to be bounding box based. And now you see that the material is being applied based on this bounding box that's kind of projected from the front, top, and side. It's kind of like an internal cubic mapping where we're making a custom UVW map. And then right now you'll see that material is square. But you can turn off squared. Like right now, it's finding whichever the largest dimension is and then kind of matching X, Y, and Z to the same longest dimension. But if you turn that off, we can scale it down. So it's kind of like the UVs are perfectly matched to the dimensions in every orientation. So yeah, that is the UV mapping, which I think is really great. Now, layering the stuff up, let's go back and let's say this is called the voxel. The power of feeding this type of thing through a cloner is, let's go and activate that. I'll say convert to cloner, and you see, yes, it is now a bunch of clones, but we can now swap other objects in. So currently it's a size of 5, so I can delete out the cube, and let's throw in a sphere, and I'll make the radius of that sphere 0.25. So of course we're based, I guess 2.5. There we go. And then you can see that every single one of those is now a sphere, and it's just in the world of the cloner, and it's a multi-instance, so it should continue to behave like really, really, quickly and cleanly. So make a plane effector, let them all push up. That's fine. Put in a field, make a spherical field, and let that scale up. We move this up a little bit, and then, now you can see that we're just making spheres in this world, cloning them on. All of it very, very quick. So this tool is definitely designed to play in the world of Mograph. And you can see just with our one-click solution there too, converting this, very handy. Speaking of one-click conversion, if we're in cube mode, and actually there's a couple things I should mention. If we're in cube mode and I hit convert the cloner, you saw it converted to a bunch of cubes because we're in cube mode. But if you hold down Alt or Option, if you're on the Mac, when you click convert the cloner, it'll actually automatically make spheres for you. Because I found myself doing that so often. It's like, let's put some Alt functionality in there. Why not? And of course, it's a cloner, so we can put multiple things in there. We'll make a cube, say 5 by 5 by 5. There's probably gonna be a refresh issue that the multi-instance has. But yeah, right now I drop it in, and you see, depending on the letter, it's perfectly alternating. So I'll just say, instead of iterating, let's make it random. And now those are randomly distributed. So some cubes, some spheres. We can now duplicate the cube again. This one will have some rounding on it. Let's say maybe a radius of 1. And we can just layer and layer up additional objects inside of here and make as many as we like. But again, this is entirely based around the cloner workflow. So let's activate the volume size and go back to seeing this as a cube. Now let's go and grab like a big complicated model. So here's one of my favorite ones just because I like the scale of it. So I'm going to search for paint under models, and they've got this paint can. So this is all set up for Redshift, and I can load it directly into my scene. And I believe this can is really close to 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters, which is why I like it. So I'm going to, again, convert this to a cloner, and I don't need that cube. I'll drop in the paint can instead. And now, because it's multi-instance, you see how quick that just popped right into existence. So I could just scale up my paint can here, let them all scale perfectly, and there we go. Now we have a giant stack of these paint cans, however we like. And let's just make a quick material here, because why not? I will make a, let's make a plain, yeah, let's do it this way. I will make a plain effector, and let's rename this plain dot color. And now that that's plain dot color, I'll move inside of it and say, don't worry about moving it up, but we do want to take on the field color. And inside of the fields, I will make a random field. And this random field, I'll say I want it to be outputting its color information, which I think should be totally random colors. So I'll just make a brand new Redshift material here. And inside of the Redshift material, let's switch this to be, I'm going to say, yeah, we're outputting the color. Double click and search for the word user. And this should work in a third-party renderer as well, as long as it can kind of see the Mograph data. So let's make a color user data, pipe that through into the color, and say, look at the Mograph color channel. Now, right here, you're not going to see it in the viewport, because unfortunately the cloner doesn't display that type of thing when we're in the multi-instance mode. I think if I say render instance, oh yeah, that's this paint, and we probably need to, yeah, I pipe that through. Let's make it not shiny. And now I'm going to say replace the label. So I'm going to hold down Alt, and that will replace those materials. And there we go. Now you can see that just the labels of the can have been replaced by these colors. Let me test my theory. Yeah, if I go to multi-instance, they're all blue. If we say render instance, then you actually see them showing up in the viewport. It's important to note, if you are in multi-instance, it will render correctly. Cloners will render correctly, but they won't show up in the viewport correctly. But yeah, we'll put render instance just for a moment. And yeah, now you can see that we get all these different color cans, all of them stacked up. And obviously we have the ability to put a random effector on there, spin the cans randomly, make them move, make them jump around, make them do whatever we want to do in a Mograph context. Let's simplify again. I just love the workflow here, because I always just delete that out, go back to cube mode, and I create it again. It's like, oh, like super clean setup, automatically ready. So just for simplicity, I'll go back to ArcKT. We got a very reasonable resolution here, so hopefully this works no problem. Let's search for the word floor, because I'm probably going to use bullet. So let's make a floor tag, or a floor object, because it's infinite. This won't render in Redshift, but we can right-click and use bullet and say a Rigidbody, and grab the cloner and also say, give me a bullet Rigidbody. And I don't think I have to change anything else. If I hit play, then now those are all set up for simulation. And now we can just drop a gigantic pile of cubes. But again, it's a volume of cubes. Hey, we got all the regulars starting to show up. Welcome, everybody. Cool. So, okay, let me show you a couple other things. So you just saw that this is the Voxel Mesher, and that's the entire volume. You saw that this is stepping in a bunch of steps here. So this is a solid hull of them. If I instead say, hey, just return the hollow object, here's what's cool. You even see the points right there. If I don't say hollow, you see all these extra points inside of it. So if I say hollow, all those points disappear, but like we don't see any fewer cubes. So if you just wanted the static image of the pixelated version, then this is a good way to go. It's hiding everything except for that outermost section. But now that's hollow. If I were to hit play, it's going to run faster because there's less. But you see, they all collapse down faster because the inside is hollow. But you might notice that there's another handy checkbox. When you make something hollow, you can then invert. So if I turn that on, essentially, this is everything that would have been on the inside. So here's kind of a fun thing. Let's say, don't invert that one. Actually, I will say invert that one. And now we'll grab both the cloner and the voxel mesher, copy and paste. Copy, paste, not cut and paste. And now on one of them, I'll say don't invert. So now I have an inside and an outside. So I'll say this, I think this one is now the outside. So I will just go to transform, say that the outside will be bright pink. And let's grab the inside and say that one can be bright blue. So now I have everything that's on the inside, everything that's on the outside, just by duplicating the rig. And now if I drop it, let this fall for a second, you're going to see we got all these pink ones on the outside. And now on the inside, we see all those blue ones revealed. So of course we can swap the cloner on the inside. So the inside ones are now spheres, the outer ones are cubes. We can make the outer one a shell and run cloth simulation on that. Like again, layers and layers on top of all of these C4D systems. And even that, you see almost everything is entirely purple because we're seeing this outer shell. But as they collapse, there are quite a few more of them on the interior overall. So you see, as this begins to settle in at the end, that we're actually seeing more blue than pink as these are able to fall and spread, and we see more of kind of the guts of this voxel mesher. So yep, super dig layering those up. Jump this back up. So yeah, just another cool option, hollow object or invert that object. Moving a little bit further, let's talk about the alternating layers. We did just use that can, but let's go and grab, yeah, well, I'll just show you. So here we are. Let's go back to a basic kind of cube mode. So here we are. We've got our layers, and we've got this thing called alternating layers. So if I say alternate on the y-axis, it is now only returning every other layer. Now, let me turn off hollow object. Visually, it'll be a little bit more clear what we're seeing. So you can see we're getting every other layer. Don't need the floor anymore. So yeah, every other layer. And this would just be very, very difficult to do without it. You have to kind of make like a plane effector and a linear field and alternate the number of layers and scale everything properly. So we just built it in the tool. And the reason we built it in the tool is I found myself wanting to stack items, but have every other layer alternate offset from each other. So there's a handy checkbox here or a button rather. If you turn on alternating layers, I can say fill in, and you actually see it makes a second volume builder, and it offsets it by half a voxel. So you can see these cubes, every other layer is stacked, it's offset by half. So this is 10 wide, so it's off by 5, off by 5. So now we could stack things like those paint cans. Like if you see that type of thing stacked in a store, typically they're not straight up pillars, they alternate every other layer. And I've actually, inside of the example scene files, so if you buy this, you get this folder inside of your zip file. And I've got this file called alternating cans, and it's all based off that can file. So now you can see that same similar setup that we had here. I'm just feeding in a pyramid shape or a cone. And I'm using alternating layers. Everything's getting randomly colorized, and we get this lovely stack that looks like it's a lot more stable. And of course, still here, still parametric. I can grab this and say, hey, it's going to be way wider, or it's going to be way skinnier. Now, of course, you can make setups here that would look kind of absurd. Let's see, I'm going to grab that dot right there and make it wider. So now they're going to be stacked and tilting out. I'm not sure that would be stable. But yeah, these things, I don't know, I just love the way they layer up with Mograph. And I think right now I did set up a little animation. So yeah, if this passes through, you'll see how the cans kind of boom, blast out. That's just Mograph, no simulation. Sweet. So yeah, alternating layers. And it alternates layers on every different mode. Now, something maybe you didn't know this, but the volume builder and let me say this again. It gets confusing with we have volume builder, volume mesher, voxel mesher. But even back in the day, forever, I don't know how long we could do this, but if I just take my text object, if I feed this into the volume builder and then feed that into the voxel mesher, I could make something separate. So let me make like a sphere, scoot this off to the side, feed this into a different volume builder and say, hey, this is half the resolution. And I also drop that volume builder inside. You're going to see that we have two different resolutions. So one mesher, multiple builders. I did not know you could do that. So yeah, those both feed through. So you can do the exact same thing with Voxel Mesher. So I can make a Voxel Mesher and feed in multiple here. And now you can see we got different resolutions for each of those independently. Now, Thunder Godling had asked about kind of different subdivisions in different areas. The tool is not specifically built to do that because the volume builder isn't built to do that, to do variable like voxel density, which I think is pretty much what you're asking about. Now, I have built rigs that do something kind of mimicking it. And honestly, even a basic one here could be kind of fun, is doing this building in multiple volume builders. So if I say, hey, the very first one's going to be 40, you see we get these huge blocks. But if I duplicate that, and maybe I'll even just keep it clean, I'll make an instance out of my text. So I only have to change one text object. This one, I'll drop it and say, this one's 20. And I'll duplicate it again and say that this one is 10. And I can duplicate it again and say that this one is 5. And you see they are layering up on top of each other and you're getting different resolutions. But the problem is that we are we're seeing all of them on top of each other. So in order to make the effect look kind of nice, and I will simplify here, let's delete 2 of them and turn off that one temporarily. What I would probably do is do sort of that noise overlay. Now, this is not, it's not the quickest thing, but let's make a random field and I'll drop that inside. And I will say, I want to see that where it's based on the objects below. And I want to see where those 2 things intersect. So based on the scale and proportions of this noise, and I think this is kind of splitting the difference. So I think in theory, half of those are moving or missing. I could move this through and we're kind of moving that clouded noise. In theory, we can now activate the other volume builder. And now you see, and actually, yeah, if I were to grab this one and just start remapping this, and let's see, I think if I take inner, nope, I grab max and start pulling back on that, you see I can start erasing out some of them. So that means we see more of the one above. And this is the way I've been typically doing it. But another thing you'll notice is that just based on the voxel mesher itself, everything gets offset by half of a voxel. So you see that these aren't perfectly lining up with it. So by making it half the size, it's kind of a manual thing where that I would have to take, I'm trying to think of an easy way of doing this. Well, let me show you. I'll do it kind of wrong first. If I move my volume builder, that it's also moving the text along with it. I don't want the text to move. So as a way of working around that right now, I will click on my text object and say rigging tag and make a constraint tag, lock it to the transform and say I want to match the position and rotation of the original text object. And that means I'm now free to move this volume builder around. And no matter what I do, the text object is going to match the original instance. So essentially, I'd want to move this over exactly 10, and probably move it forward exactly 10. And now, in theory, these are now lining up like grid-wise. So as I increase or decrease resolutions, that one will match up. If I make a smaller one, I probably have to move it over half a voxel again. So yeah, it turns into layering up multiple versions of this. Now I have done that. The main graphic of Voxel Mesher, the sale one, I did layer up a bunch of these, and I put a different random field as a, let me just kind of do it here. I've made a different random field saying intersect on the previous object, and that one's identical right now. But if I were to move this and change my minimum, you can see I can start erasing out some of them. So all I have to do is keep on grabbing the various voxel meshes and erasing out some of them, making a duplicate of the entire rig. And then this one, I'll drop this down to 10, give this a different random seed perhaps. And now you can see that like different blocks and different resolutions are coming through. And if you layer up enough of them at the correct resolution, you can kind of fill out your entire object. In theory, you could kind of get an almost perfect version if you took one noise and the inversion of the noise on another one. But right now, that would be a very manual process. But yeah, you can layer them up, just let them intersect. But there is no subdivide specifically. I'm trying to think of any kind of clever way of doing that. Like in theory, you could take the end result of one and then make another subdivision on top of it. But I think it would be as tedious as what we were just doing here. So hopefully that sort of answers that question. Here's a handy little thing. You know the workflow is put it into a volume builder and then into a mesher, or put into now a volume builder, put into a voxel mesher. Well, if I take my text object and I drop it directly inside a voxel mesher detects that there is no volume builder, and you can just click this button. This button only exists when there isn't a builder. If I click on that, it automatically interjects it in between the two objects, so it saves you a click. Let's see. Yes. 40 Thieves is here. Excellent. Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, I like seeing all the regulars. Anybody with any specific questions, please put them in. Justin, you haven't seen any voxelizer in C4D. Do this. Let's say I import a quad mesh in the C4D of a voxel asset. Does your plugin allow you to perfectly align the voxel grid precisely? 1 out of 2. That's quad mesh, so I can turn it back into voxels 1-to-1. Apologies, I'm not quite following your question. Like, I guess maybe I don't know the definition of a quad mesh, because I thought maybe that's just like perfectly, all the polygons would be 4-sided, but I don't think that's what you mean. So yeah, apologies. If you think of slightly better wording, like let me know. I can try and tackle it. It doesn't work with Alembic. I mean, this should work with, if you can feed into a volume builder, you should be able to feed it into anything. I guess just for fun. And I just wish this ran a little bit faster, but I would love to show you a quick demo, and maybe we can do it from scratch of, let's go in here. A quick demo of getting getting an animation, like an animated character inside here. I did just show this off in the demos, and you just saw the dancing guy. I'm going to go into demos, and I think I've got, the swing dancing file. And let's even, so what I did is I went to Mixamo, the Adobe, well, Adobe bought it, the Adobe product, and I downloaded this character, and it's just this character doing this swing dance, dancing around doing this thing. Now the materials didn't come over clean. Oh, is this the bad one? I think I overdrove it or something. As you see, the just the raw imports making him like twitch all over the place. Anyway, okay, I guess I'll start from this bad one, and then you can see what I'm doing. But for the most part, I'm going to copy and paste this into a new file because there's some take-based things that can make that weird. I'm going to not worry about the materials coming over. And then, I want everybody to know this just for clarity, is if you make a connect object, well, essentially, I want to view all of these as a single mesh. So that's kind of a starting point here. If I turn off weld, I want that to run really fast. But as soon as I put all those models inside a connect, as soon as I hit play, you see suddenly my frame rate drops really, really bad. And I'm kind of surprised the connect will go that slow. I mean, obviously there are some materials and UVs and stuff it's trying to combine. I'm just surprised how slow that goes. So with all of that as a caveat, I'm going to pop open, actually, I guess we should go to the demo file, Voxel Mesher. Oh, not beta, staging for launch, Voxel Mesher, example files, and I think I had, maybe because there's, wait, no, I do have it, backflip. Okay, cool. So now let's yoink. Oh, I guess in this one I didn't use a connect object. Okay, so anyway, here we've got essentially the exact same setup. Here's that same construction worker, except this time he's gonna be doing a backflip. Woohoo! All right, so he does a backflip. So let's do the entire process. I want a volume builder, and let's drop in this to the volume builder. And immediately I want more resolution, so I'll drop it down to 5, and now let's feed that into a voxel mesher. So now we get that. Now, immediately you're seeing a bunch of holes in it. This would happen in the volume builder as well. And that's because the Mixamo character is coming in, and like his pants, like the top of the pants aren't closed, like the vest isn't closed, etc. So inside the volume builder, I can simply go, and unfortunately we can't I can't shift click on the objects and do them at the same time. But if I select the body, I can say optimize and close holes. And as I do this on all of those, it's essentially parametrically closing all those holes. And especially if I click on these pants and click on it, you can see suddenly the mesh comes into view. Now we can click on our voxel mesher, and I can increase my threshold to inflate the character a little bit. Honestly, I often forgot about the range threshold. So all the time I would put an inflate on my meshes. For the most part, you just grab your range threshold and increase it a little bit and make your character inflate. There's not really any additional calculation time. So having done that, the volume builder does take a chunk of time to make this run. So you can see the playback is not amazing. If I turn off our voxel mesher, you see the voxel mesher is almost none of that calculation time. This is all coming from the volume builder doing like essentially a full refresh every time. And if I reactivate voxel mesher, I don't really see a drop in the frame rate. But now you can see that this is a voxel character, and he's now doing all of that motion. And it's working just fine. But where things get interesting is another feature, and you can thank Mike the Monkey for this being a feature in this tool at all, because he built a rig that did it, and we thought, oh, that's so cool, we got to build it directly in. So you're going to see that we have a checkbox here that we haven't talked about yet called Vertex Color Map. If we activate that, you're going to see an interface that might be familiar to you, because this should look almost identical to the shader field. So if you make a shader field, you can see you get the custom shader, and we can link to a shader. And it's unfortunately all of this stuff, Maxon hasn't updated this stuff to look at Redshift. It all still looks at the old shaders of the old standard and physical renderer. So that's still the workflow that we're dealing with. But so we mimicked the interface, and now under this, it's looking for a custom shader. So we saw that this character has some materials. So if I click, it's not already preloaded. So I'm going to pop that open, and now you can see I've got the construction workers material. So if I say, hey, open up that material, it's not in the search path. I'm going to say, no, I don't care. The instant I add that in, he is now appropriately colorized. Every voxel is taking on the color of the character. So if you have a mesh and it's got good UVs, you can just apply the material in Voxel Mesher and it's going to apply it to the voxels, which I think like it's just so cool that these things translate over. So if I apply, like this will now run a little bit slower because it's doing all these color calculations. And you got to keep in mind that's now taking this material, trying to find every voxel, find the closest object that it's made from, find the closest polygon it's made from, find the exact point on that polygon. Based on that point of the polygon, go into the UV map and find out what the material should be given that information. So it's actually doing quite a bit. But now that is layered through, this is now colorizing our character properly. And what's fun is, it's still all voxelized. So something I like doing is in the voxel mesher, we can still play with this range threshold. So I could shrink this down further. And as we go in, they're still colorized. And if I go further out and we go to a maximum voxel range, we get this big beefy character, but the colors still look kind of correct on top of them. And if we grab our volume builder and we start increasing our interior and exterior range, let's say like 5x5, keep in mind a lot more calculation time, but you see he inflates even more and he starts looking like, what's that old, like, isn't there like an old like comic strip or something with like a little construction guy? It starts looking like that. And the colors are still propagating through properly, which I think is really cool. Keep in mind, like, I don't know, there might be 100 times as many voxels on this thing. So like our speed, actually the speed is not as bad as I thought it would be, hitting play on that. Or it's not 10 times slower, but now you can see we got this big inflated version of the character still moving, still doing the animation, and still essentially getting the appropriate colors applied. So layering that type of stuff up on top of everything I thought was incredibly powerful. It's a really, really fun workflow. Now let's layer up on top of that still. Okay, so if I click on the Voxel Mesher, you already saw that we've been doing a lot of that convert to cloner workflow. Well, that workflow does the exact same thing when you're dealing with these color vertex maps. So if I say convert to cloner, it's doing the same thing. It is now, oh, I'm in shell mode. Let me hit, actually, let me just delete those. I actually want to be in cube mode. It's a difference in cube mode or not cube mode. Those got hidden. Okay, so that's back. Okay, so now if I'm in shell mode, it converted the cloner to shell mode, which I didn't want. I want cube mode. So in cube mode, I'm going to say convert to cloner, and you're going to see it. Let me deselect. It doesn't look any different, and that's because it converted this to point mode. It made the cloner. It set the cloner to multi-instance, cloning onto the points, the direct vertexes, and it also made a plane effector that's now named plane.color, and it linked in this vertex map, which is called the shader color, and it's now feeding that through directly into our plane effector. So now these clones are getting the proper color on top of it. So again, I could delete this sphere, or I could delete the cube, make a sphere, and drop in this sphere inside of here. Change the scale to be appropriate, 2.5, I think. And now he's made entirely out of spheres. In my demo video, I went and made a character entirely out of glass orbs, all layered up on top of each other. So very fun to be able to layer this stuff on top of each other. And again, maintain the colors straight through this process. And again, if I play, I don't think it's going to be much slower because, the cloner workflows, doesn't eat much of the time. So now you see we've got these clones propagating through doing their thing. So yeah, we are now converting a character, maintaining the color, and transferring it to a custom cloner, still having complete control over it. Just checking to see if there's any questions. Yep, just suggestions. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so zooming around, I think I'd like to actually, I'm going to play the commercial again and post the link just because we're going for a while here. So I'll be right back. Everybody, especially because people have been popping up in the chat. So here is the Voxel Mesher commercial I put together. Yeah. Um, so yeah, that was fun to put together. If you saw anything in the little commercial that you are intrigued by or you'd like to know how I did it, please let me know. But for now, I definitely have more things to talk about. And there's one thing I did not know about volume builders that I wish I knew. I literally found out about this like a week and a half before we launched the plugin, and we went back and added in features to make sure that it continued to work with Voxel Mesher because of how kind of powerful it is. So I think I would love to. Actually, I'll just start. I'll go back to the text again, and this kind of based around that Lego brick idea or a building block. So let's type in arcade T. Let's go back to lemon milk. Boom. And thicker. Cool. Okay. Set that to the middle. And let's put that into a volume builder. And then put that into a volume mesher. Okay, so if I look at the mesh right now, you can see that essentially you can kind of use your imagination here, and you can kind of imagine a cloud of voxels, almost like a cloud of points. And the center point there is like a cube. Now here they round out the cubes, but you see this giant grid of polygons. So if I grab my text object and I kind of slide this to the left or right, you can see we're kind of passing through that cloud. See how the polygons don't really move, but our object is moving through them. And now in this particular case, like in certain places, we're just lined up better with the voxels. Like right there, the letters are separated. Now, normally, if I wanted the letters separated, I'd have to spread them out, or I'd have to increase my resolution, or like really work around it. But just by moving that to a new spot, I was able to find like a good spot. Or maybe alternatively, I wanted to get them both connected. You see there is just kind of a frame right there where they are both connected. So we kind of get those options, but we had to move our object to do that. But if I grab my volume builder, if you didn't know this, inside of C4D, if you hold down the number 7 and you move or rotate or scale an object, it will move only the object that's selected, not the children. So now I can hold on 7. And now as I move this, you see the text is not moving, but I'm actually moving the grid of voxels around. So yeah, the entire grid of voxels traveling around. But here's the thing I did not know that I was totally blown away by. That is, if we make inside the volume builder, you see there's something called override grid matrix. So if I make a null and I drop that inside of the grid matrix, when I move this null around, it's like I'm moving the voxel builder object around. So I can scoot this left and right and up and down. But then I can hit R for rotate, and I can spin this around. And you can see I can reorient the null and reorient the giant cloud of voxels that are traveling around. So right there, already that's pretty powerful. But the one that I am most interested in, let's reset all of those. The one I am most intrigued by is the idea of a scaling it. We've got this giant 3D cube of points or voxels. If I grab my Y scale and I start scaling it down, I can start shrinking or essentially increasing the resolution only on one axis. We're squishing down the grid that's calculating the voxels. I had no idea that that was a thing. So that's super cool. So we made sure that that functionality, it already did sort of work directly inside of Voxel Mesher, but we made sure it worked fully. So let's just do this again, essentially from scratch. So I'll just make our text object and reset everything on there. Feed this in, actually, we can skip that step. I'll feed that right into a Voxel Mesher. And now click my Create Volume Builder button, which is quicker than going in that menu twice. And now let's say I want to essentially make Legos out of this. Well, let's do the same workflow. Let's make a null and drag that inside of my override grid matrix, grab the null and say start scaling down on Y. And you can see I'm now increasing the resolution in one dimension. So like right away, that's pretty cool. Let's reset that to 1 because I also want to show that we could still move this. And you can see I'm actually, the text isn't moving, but the volume is. And if I hit R for rotate, this looks significantly cooler than it does in the volume builder or the mesher. As I rotate this, keep in mind the text is not moving, just the volume inside of it is. So like look at this, like look how much cooler that kind of looks, like how much more dimension there is. Even if we put this almost back to default, like just a little bit of a tilt, just a little bit of rotation is suddenly, I just feel like the voxels kind of like jump out of it when this is all a regular rotation. Let me reset that. It's very flat. Yes, it's pixelated, but as soon as we add in just a little bit of rotation, and you get you kind of break the walls just a little bit, it feels so much more voxelated. So yeah, very, very cool. Dig layering that up in that way. But you just saw that the thing I'm really excited about is the idea of scaling this down, because now that looks, Lego bricks and building bricks, Mega Blocks, etc. They don't they don't have a uniform scale. Like obviously they're usually squished down on one dimension. So now that I've squished these down a little bit, why don't we go and make ourselves a very, very quick Lego brick here? I think that we are still in, yeah, a voxel size of 10. So let me just temporarily turn that off. We'll make a cube. We'll set this to be 10 by 10. I'll just say by 3. So that's like 1/3 the height. I'm just, completely estimating there. And if we want to even add in some extra detail, let's hit I to inset, D to extrude. I'm going to grow because that's clearly not thick enough. I know my Lego. Shrink that down significantly. And then we could go and do a bunch of Boolean operations. Actually, I guess we can. The new Boolean is pretty great. The new bool. Drop that down. I'm trying to keep it relatively clean resolution-wise. Shrink that down, move it up, intersect that. Could be kind of thin there. Again, just eyeballing. And let's just do the extra step and make a, where is it hiding? Boolean. So I want to combine the cube and the bool, union of the two to make it editable. Cool. So we'll just call this brick. And now let's reactivate our entire setup here. And now we know that that's 0.3 in height relative to it. So I'll grab my coordinates and say this is now 0.3 in height. So that should be perfectly matching the brick I just made. Clearly, I made it a little too thin, but whatever. Now let's grab our Voxel Mesher, and I'm going to be in cube mode, and I'll say convert to cloner. So now it's cloning a bunch of them. Instead of that cube, I'll drop in this brick. And did I shrink that too far? Those definitely look like they're intersecting. Oh, I did do 0.2. That looks better. I was like, why does it look so thin? I didn't think I went that thin. Okay, 0.3. Now you can see that I'm returning a point cloud. And now I'm saying that point cloud is being fed this brick. Again, multi-instance. And now we're getting all of these. So, if I were to make an animation out of this, typical thing I do is like we have to add in a little bit of imperfection here. So I might make a random effector. And based on that random effector, let's say that this, I want to offset them. I'm going to offset them like 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, just the tiniest amount. But already you can see how these are like popping out from each other. And then maybe I'd grab some rotation and rotate this like 2 degrees, even just like 1 degree, and maybe like 0.1, 0.1, just adding a little bit of imperfection. But that's going to help like the highlights catch from different angles. So yeah, just a little bit of imperfection there. And then let's go and grab, in this case, I'll make a plane effector. I'll say I don't want to affect the position, but I do want to take on the field color. And even here, let's just call this random imperfection. And I'll call this one plane dot color. That's fine. Under fields, I will make a random field and say don't affect calculation or value, but yes, affect color. And now you see you get all these random colors. Now I could go and pull up an image of a Lego brick and start like color picking all the different ones, but I've actually already done that in the past for myself. So I'm going to go to a color gradient and say, yes, a gradient, load in a preset. And I actually myself, you might remember from last stream, but I started making a lot of like custom gradients for myself. So here I made a whole bunch of them and I actually made like 3 different Lego presets. So if I double click on that, now I'm actually getting these standard Lego brick colors. I'll say double knots just so that or I'll even say double the knots. So we just see like lots of them. And and the reason I'm doubling them is because a normal Perlin noise, most of the colors are in the middle gray, which means we're mostly seeing the ones towards the middle. So by repeating it, I'm kind of saying we'll see them a little bit more equally. Now, having said that, I could go into my scale and start scaling this up. And if I go up large enough, we will start getting clusters of them, which I do think looks a lot cooler. So if I increase the scale here, you see I'm getting these rainbow effects of all the standard Lego colors going through it. And, that just becomes an input for our matrix object, or for our cloner rather. So I can double click a material, drop that onto our voxel, and I am going to want them to be all shiny. And let's go and make another user data. And we can add imperfections, etc. But some of that will take time. Say that that's going to be based on Mograph. Just like I said before, we're not going to see the different colors here in the viewport because it doesn't show multi-instance of viewport. If I say render instance, you do see them. But now that I've done that, I mean, we could go back to the original brick and put like the little icon. We could put some bevel on there. Honestly, because it is parametric, let's risk it. I'm going to search for a bevel deformer. I'll drop that on and let's set that down to like 0.1. Yeah, just a little bevel. Grab my Fong tag and set this to be area square weighted, which is just going to give us a nice looking simple bevel everywhere. Just catch those highlights even better. And Yeah, let's throw an HDR in here, an HDRI, clear that out, go to auto, click on HDRs, grab an interior. I know this room one looks good. I think it's actually the one I used in my render. Let that load on in. Cool. And now let's pop open Redshift. Boom. Isn't this so much better? Remember, I couldn't render for years because machine couldn't stream and do it at the same time. So yeah, those are going. If I were to grab my dome light, I can start spinning this around until you see I'm kind of catching the angle. That's maybe getting a couple little highlights going. Yeah, maybe something kind of like that. The new version of Redshift, you have to, if you want to hide it, you have to go under details and drag your camera down. So it's actually a percentage now, so we can drag it down to 0. So yeah, now we have those bricks floating. And of course, if we want to go all the way for some sort of animation here, I can grab this and make another, let's just make a random effector. And I'll say mostly up and down, add some rotation in. We'll say 90, 90, 90. No scale. And I mean, already that looks kind of cool, just them all exploded out. But let's just put in another, we'll make a spherical field. Scoot this into a location, scale it up a bit, and we get the bricks all drifting apart from there. And obviously we could spend a lot more time. We could layer it up. In my animation, I didn't even run simulation in my animation, but I did make all sorts of like remapped little fall offs, and I made it so that there's also a plane effector that was pushing them up at the same time the random was pushing them out. So they mostly drifted upward, and it really kind of hid any collision effects that might be catching the eye. But yeah, look, we just made this completely from scratch, entirely Lego, running super fast, all parametric. Like, that's the best part here. Let's go back to our original text object and just say live, click it, and boom, updates, propagates through, updates, boom, right there in the render, ready to go. Entirely parametric setup. So much fun. So yeah, definitely rotate your voxels, scale your voxels, move them around. And then, of course, now we can convert them automatically and make all this crazy stuff. Eric, yes, you caught I typed 0.2 instead of 0.3. And yeah, Mograph, yeah, the holding down 7 on your keyboard, very, very handy. I actually use it quite often. So yeah, that is, this is one of my favorite workflows here that we're actually kind of propagating color through and building this out of bricks, or you saw like paint cans or anything that you want to be stacked up very precisely, super fast. And yeah, you go and throw on like some of those imperfections. I don't know if these are available in Maxon 1 or in C4D, but under, actually, I don't know where they hide them. Maybe under textures. Yeah, under textures, if you click on that, you see all these imperfections. And yeah, as I mouse over them, I'm not really seeing much in the way of Maxon 1 icons here. Maybe as we go down further. No, I think everybody gets all of these. Let me scale them up a little bit larger. Look at these lovely imperfection maps. You get like fingerprints and smudges and all this. So you layer a couple of these up into your reflection channel and maybe a little bit into a bump channel. And you can add all these lovely imperfections on top of everything. So very, very fun. Highly recommend it. The asset browser, if you have not been playing with the asset browser, they are adding so many models, so many materials, things like the imperfections and the HDRs. I think they are Maxon 1, just throwing it out there, but they added in a ton of skies super recently, and they're like super high resolution. So yeah, like the asset browser's got a lot of the basics of what you need. So yeah, that's the Lego demo. I'll keep the file open here for anybody who wants to go check it out. But it is important to note that I do have, I called it brick something. Yeah, building brick. So inside the example files here is essentially a simplified version of everything we were just talking about here. So you see it's kind of drifting into position, a little bit fancier there. And this one might even be doing, oh no, okay, it's just as simple. I thought I might have had imperfections on that. Yeah, but layering up the same thing. So you've already got access to it if you pick up Voxel Mesher. Very cool. Yeah. In the you said reflection channel, maybe Tobias is referring to, is Twitch lagging further behind because people are responding slower over there than usual? So I wonder if there's like a 30-second plus delay. But yeah, I meant the not necessarily maybe you lower the reflection, but I was mostly talking about the roughness channel of the reflection if you put the imperfections to make certain parts blurrier and other parts shinier. Okay. Not seeing voxel's not illuminated. Justin's just saying it'd be a cool demo if to simulate a pixel art type lighting on a voxel mesh get illuminated. Yeah, I mean that could be cool, kind of cool. I mean, it just kind of sounds like we could make some of these be glowy or something based on like a fall off or something being fed through. Probably is. You're totally right about that. And yeah, we could run simulation on that. I'm not sure I want to run it on that complicated of a mesh, not that super complicated, but like here on a stream with this many copies. Let's see. Let's see if there's any specific other ones I want to pop open here. Actually, this it's actually maybe not the super best demo live. I kind of like this one. If you remember, my second tutorial ever on Rocket Lasso was 3D scanning a gnome from photos. So I took that gnome in, and here he is at all these different resolutions with his little snail. Look at him go all the way down to just a few blocks. And that's just me changing the resolution, and the like obviously the color just propagates straight through. I think I would like to demo kind of procedural texturing on top of the voxels, because this is kind of where I was doing a lot of those world building visuals. Let me see if I've got, I'm gonna grab my NAB presentation. Yeah, because that's got the commercial in it. So I think I'm already muted. This is already muted. I'll just make sure that that's muted. So, yeah, so I showed off a little bit here, but you see a lot of my animations here are kind of these kind of like environmental, like landscape visuals. And I just kind of got a little obsessed with making them because they were like a lot of fun to make. You do have to be careful because it's easy. I guess another example here is just a whole city. That's like, I have the resolution of the voxel so high, it's almost hard to tell that they're voxels. So in the commercial, I intentionally showed like the viewport version of it, where each of those is its own little cube. Ran reasonably well as well. But yeah, like this one, you see like this landscape here. Like it's just fun, like building these things essentially procedurally. So I'd like to show a little demo of that. Keep in mind the playback in the viewport can get a little slow, because keep in mind we are at this point throwing millions of voxels at the scene. But let's see what we can do here. I wonder if, yeah, let's do it as a landscape. Why not? Let's start out. How do I want to show this? Let's start out real basic. I might open up that lion model. Actually, no, let's do something weirder like the T-Rex or the elephant. Yeah, we haven't used the elephant in these demos. So let's search for the elephant. There he is. So I just want the body, reset that to basic. There we go. So we've got the elephant. Let's throw that in. Actually, I'm probably going to just make sure that the MD to make sure that the eyes are closed, because otherwise you have to close the mesh and then it's a lot less kind of procedural. I think that's the only hole. Maybe the mouth has one, but yeah, let's do that. Okay, cool. I'll throw that into a Voxel Mesher. Create the volume builder, and now you see pixelated elephant instantly, which is pretty cool. And let's say we want to start colorizing this in some cool custom ways. Now, the elephant here is not overly subdivided, so I might put that into a subdivision surface. So let's put it inside there. I'll just subdivide by 1. And I'm going to make a custom shader of some sort. So why don't I... How do I want to do it? I think we'll just make a vertex map. So I'll right click and say other and make a vertex color map. And now you see that there's no colors on the elephant. But if you haven't done this before, it's pretty fun. We can make a shader field. And like I said earlier, the shader field's still working off the old shaders, but some of them are pretty great still. So there's a shader field. Inside of said shader field, I'm going to feed in not a Fresnel, but an effect fall off. And now what the fall off does is based on sort of the orientation of the normal of the object, it's going to colorize it. So here it's saying it's looking up and down essentially. So anything that's looking straight down is getting colorized black. Anything that's looking straight up is getting colorized white. Anything that's at the halfway point is going to be getting this middle gray. to show this better, I'll load in this rainbow preset, and I can see that the purple is at the bottom and the red is at the top, and we actually transition nice and smoothly between them. Now, having said that, we could think of this a bunch of different ways, but just think of it like a mask. So let's say we wanted to make this look like some sort of stone elephant statue covered in snow. So now I could just kind of crunch these in really, really tight. And now you see that there's only snow at anything that's aiming upward. But maybe I want to add a little extra imperfection there. Like, the snow will slide off certain parts and others not. So if you give this a little bit more of a fall off, we can then layer it. And we're actually using the old style of layering, which is going to be something like a fusion channel. So I'll say fusion because we're just combining two. And I want to blend it with a noise. And if you're familiar, I kind of wish they would put this in more place in cinema, but there's a overlay type or a blend type called lever, which is like overlay, but it goes to the extreme. So if I turn on overlay, you're going to see a little bit. Do you see how that's dipping down a little bit and then it's going up a little bit? It's like we need to crank up the contrast though, but you don't have to crank up the contrast if you say lever, because it's the same thing, but it's cranking it to full contrast. I'll grab my noise and start increasing it. As I increase it, based on, let me get large enough where I am seeing the resolution. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to increase the resolution of the elephant so we actually see more detail. So now as I scale this noise larger or smaller, you can see how I'm getting a little bit of imperfection on the way that layered. Keep in mind that is overlaying on top of this gradient. So I could pull this gradient down further, which, I think I will. So it's going a little bit further. It's maybe a little generous for how far snow would stick. But getting that little imperfection. That is a basic Perlin noise, but we could change that to something messier like Luca. And again, play with the scale, lots of imperfection, more or less if we want to, but lots of like little missing spots, parts are filled in, and just colorizing the top. So now that I've done that, why don't we colorize the elephant? And that shader is getting calculated, so I'll yank that out from the volume hierarchy. And you see the color is still being calculated, but now we need that to propagate up to our model somehow. So let's just convert this to cloner right away. And now I've got a cloner, and the cloner is doing its own thing. So inside of the cloner, I'll make I did it wrong. We should, one step, sorry, don't want to lose anybody. I clicked on it when we are in shell mode, which clones planes onto the outer shell of it. Instead, I'm going to say I'm in cube mode and now convert it. So now it's actually a bunch of cubes. So this is now cubes. So I want to colorize that. Let's create a plane effector. Don't push up on Y. Yes, affect the color. How do we want to generate the color? Well, we just want to get the color from this vertex map. I'll grab the vertex map, drag it on, and the instant I do, it's taking on the color of the mesh that was underneath it. And now our voxels are colorized just based on that gradient. So pretty straightforward technique to get procedural coloring on things. But I like pushing that technique further. So instead of this just being like snow on this black elephant, why don't we say that this is supposed to more like be moss on top of stone? So let's move back into our vertex map, and we'll just be seeing this update on the voxel, which could be good, could be bad, just for our feedback. But now let's think of this as a mask instead. So I will copy that shader, and now we could just for clarity, I can say clear, and then make a brand new fusion. So now you see I've got empty fusion, and I'm going to say the base channel is going to be the stone, I think. So we could make another fall off, which I will. So another fall off, and I'll say the color of the stone here. I'm dragging this down just so we're seeing that shader. The color of the stone will be kind of a dark gray to a medium gray. I mean, it's getting a little dark, so I'll just pull that up a little bit. And we could complicate this more. I could load a preset, and maybe I've got something like Misty River. So it's kind of like, okay, it's kind of like got some different colors on there a little bit. Maybe we don't want to get quite so blue under there, and I could scoot these colors around, just get some imperfections on there. And now I want to add a layer of moss. So let's go and make another gradient. I can just duplicate this up to the top. And now let's load a different preset. Let's see if I got something kind of green and mossy-ish. Rolling fields, that's pretty good. Inside that fusion, I'm going to crank this up so we're seeing the top layer. And these get really dark. So I'll yank out the darkest ones and distribute the knots here. And honestly, that's still just kind of dark, so I'm going to just brighten up these greens so they pop out. That's a little neon for me. It'll be a little cartoony, but at least it's going to pop. Cool. So now we kind of got this moss layer. So now, remember, I copied the mask. So if I say use a mask, I can drop in paste the shader, and now there's a mask of where those cutoffs are. So now I've got one shader for stone, one shader for the moss, which I can like pull up and recolorize. Maybe the medium will be bright and the top will be a little bit darker. This bottom layer, we made that gradient, but maybe that's just a noise. I'll say, okay, that's just noise based. It will be a Luca. It will be a relatively large Luca, and it can be stretched up vertically on Y. So there's a little bit of like up and down randomness there. And we can choose the darkest value and the lightest value. So I can pull that up. Maybe there's even like a little bit of warmth in the color of the stone just to get like a little bit of a pop on there. Yeah, so there's kind of this warm stone. So there's a noise, there's a gradient, both overlaid by a noise and the gradient. And now this elephant is getting moss placed on the top of it. So, right away, I think that's a pretty fun technique, but the stuff can continue to layer. We've now made a procedural rig. So I could make a sphere here and, I don't know. Let's put a sphere on his head. He's balancing a sphere, and let's drop that inside the subdivision surface. And instantly, actually I forgot, the subdivision surface only sees the first object. So let's make a connect object, don't weld, and make that the first object. And now we'll see both. So now you can see that updated, and now we've got a mesh updating, getting this noise, this imperfections on the edge, procedurally coloring it. So from here, building out a scene, let me pull the commercial back up again, which I think closed. Making an entire scene like this isn't so daunting when you see, if you look at all the stonework I've got here, it's like, oh, there's just like some simple gray for most of it. And then the top sides get this green. So from here, I can just start layering these up. Like, let's say that this instead is not just an elephant, but like an elephant statue. So let's make a ring shape. So I'll make a tube. And where are my handles? There's some handles. Make that larger. Make this inside. We probably want a lot more rotation segments. Let's drop that inside. And now we've got like this little rounded donut shape. And then I'll grab the elephant, and it's a little large maybe for what I'm doing. So I'll shrink it down, drop it into a cloner, set that to be a radial cloner, increase my radius. And now we've got a bunch of elephants. Increase the elephant count. You can't have too many elephants. Raise them up maybe a hair, and let's just plop that whole thing into the connect, and all of them update. And now we've got this, kind of like landscape statuey series of elephants with moss covering them, and each one's going to be unique. The noise is touching each one differently. We could increase those fall offs to make everything be a little bit different if we wanted. And here's a technique that I really, really like, is now that we're kind of combining all these through this connect object, and then we are subdividing them. Keep that in mind. And that's, by the way, why this tube is getting subdivided, which maybe I don't want. So I might rearrange my hierarchy a little bit here. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to subdivide the elephant, but I want the connect to be outside of it, and then the subdivisions inside the connect. And now I'll move my tag onto the connect, which, by the way, you can actually see the detail directly on here. Now, an important thing to note is this technique requires your base mesh to be subdivided enough to get the resolution you want. If this elephant was really, really low res, there wouldn't be enough kind of pixels. There wouldn't be enough points on his back to get the colors we want. And we're kind of seeing that here with this tube shape, where there just aren't that many polygons. So if I grab the tube and I start adding in extra cap segments, and I start adding in extra height segments, you're going to see that we actually have more information that we can work from. But here's the tech. And now the elephants should look like they're standing on that a little bit better. Now, here's the technique I really like, is we've got this connect object, which is ultimately doing the calculations. And I'm pretty sure if we reactivate, everything's propagating through, because that's still technically the same tag, even though we moved it around. If we deform this somehow, check this out. Actually, I'll just use a random effector. So a lot of you probably know, but you can make any one of these effectors. I'll make a random effector. I'll drop it as a child of the connect. And I'm going to say, instead of affecting Mograph objects, I'm going to say you're going to behave as a deformer. I'm going to say deform the points. And you see this exploded and all this crazy nonsense. But if we start just pulling back on that gently, kind of want the... All right, I'm going to rearrange again. I'm going to say... Well, I just don't want the elephants that subdivided. So I'll try yanking out the subdivision, but maybe that's a bad idea. I don't know. So now you can see I'm deforming everything and just distorting it. But ultimately, we're just putting this into a volume. So the distortion doesn't really matter that much. You see that it's all just going to kind of survive the process. And then we throw that into the volume. And now look at how much I've now destroyed all of this. Look how much imperfection I have. This very, very simple tube shape suddenly has all of this extra dimension to it. So, and often I find myself, let's turn on SSAO. A little bit of lighting would probably make this pop as well. But now that I've got this random, you can push it really far before things properly break. So let's like really crank this, and like we're starting to not see the elephants too much, but like it's just surviving the process. So we get all this crazy nonsense because look at the crazy geometry that's being fed in, but the volume can handle it. And so essentially this is the crazy blob we're now turning into voxels. We turn that into voxels and it gets colorized. So the idea of layering this stuff up and being able to make like just cool voxel scenes or those ancient ruins. Another place where I did something similar, but I destroyed it less. Let's see. Yeah, this like a little skeleton. So these are just some trees I made and the skeleton, and I'm just plopping it in. And in this case, you see that same type of mask, just black and white on top of it. And I made some snowflakes falling down, and they all just layer up on top of each other. Anyway, I dig it. I think that's super fun. And layering up more and more layers on top of this is what gets fun, where it's like, okay, I don't want to push this too far, but let's make a cylinder, plop that in a, essentially the same type of cloner. Let's make some pillars here. Make those taller. Oops, wrong handle. Make those taller. And I'll even duplicate the tube. Let's move that tube down. As I move it down, it is kind of passing through a clouded noise, so I got to let that calculate. Drop in those same cylinders. Boop. Those automatically get converted. And keep in mind, I can only send in the look how low, actually, there's a good example. Do you see how low the resolution of the texture is here? Do you see how we get these big blobs? And that's because the incoming cylinders don't have many subdivisions. So if I say, actually, this has 24 height subdivisions, suddenly there's a bunch of colors. If I say there's 36 going around it, suddenly there's a bunch more colors to go around it. So yeah, just by changing those resolutions, look how quickly I've added to the structure. And, again, the incoming geometry, absolute nonsense. Final results, really cool. So yeah. So if you are kind of thinking in the world, kind of in terms of like Minecraft type stuff, like this is kind of the furthest I've pushed those types of concepts of being able to layer all these on top of each other. Yeah. Anyway, checking out the questions. Okay, either there's just no questions or everybody's just in awe of this of these voxelated elephants all piled up here. So yeah, please hit me with any questions as we go. I said this earlier on, but there is a very special Patreon discount. So if you are supporting on Patreon, you can actually get more. You can get, it's like 27% off or something. So I'm going to post that in the chat just for supporting on Patreon. And I do think I'm going to be doing a lot more focus on Patreon, trying to get like more videos out, put them on Patreon first for a little while, get access to more scene files and special kind of like just things I'm tinkering around with and showing them off. So it's definitely a good time to start supporting on Patreon. And you get discounts to every single tool we make. So that's, a powerful addition as well. We've actually gotten through a lot of the demos that I really wanted to talk about. There's more, and there's so many different ways of combining this and making it. I kind of chopped it really apart, but I had this giant animation where I was kind of showing off all these different styles and just like wacky looking things I layered up. In all these styles where I was just like, okay, well, like what types of weird things can I make? These look like hamburgers, but they're actually donuts. But if I increase the resolution anymore, you couldn't read the text. Let's see. Just a bunch of spheres. This is doing that slices or the alternating layers. And it, keep in mind, yeah, so there's this one. And I do like the look of the elephant. I'll save that file just because I like it. Episode 1, scene files. Elephant statue. Oh yeah, this. Yeah, so if we just pop this open, and we've got text somewhere, but we got a lot of files open now. Middle, scroll, Arial black, deeper, voxel. Oop, let's type it right. Voxel. Yeah, feed that through into a voxel mesher. And cubes. Actually, I'm going to do polygons. Let's create that volume builder. Say this is based on Z+. And now we get all these individual layers. And then we, these are actually all individual separate polygons, but now we just throw that into a connect object, and I'll throw that into a Voronoi fracture. There we go. So that's going to take every individual object, turn it into its own little clone, and now we can run Mography things on there. Throw a, I guess just a random effector. Now you can see we can move these pieces around randomly. Let's set this to be noise-based, indexed, and now we can let those drift around, do their thing. We could say instead of position, this is going to be rotation-based, and let them spin on their own axis. Whee! And maybe I'll put a little more space in those letters because 2 of them are touching. There we go. And yeah. If we make that not indexed, then they're going to be based on relative to each other, increase the scale. And now you see they're all kind of linked on top of each other. In the field, make a linear fall off. Linear fall off. And we'll say on Z, shrink this way down. Yeah, do something like that. So you can see as it passes through this fall off, those front ones pretty much not moving at all, and the back ones will move a lot. So you see how I was able to parametrically set this, a more complicated setup like this up, layering up. So we're almost getting a slicer-like effect, but keep in mind we got this low resolution on there. Yeah. Mograph asking if I did a scene for Bill Nye. No, that was put together by henchmen. Let me jump to that moment. This was put together by henchmen, and luckily for me, Mike the Monkey is one of the beta testers, and he got to actually use this in production. And so it's just really cool to see this get put together. So yeah, while in beta, this tool was already used. So all this text, probably using a similar technique to what I showed. And then I think also the explosion, boom. So yeah, using Voxel Mesher to translate in a very similar way to what I was just showing off with the Lego scene that we had. Which one was that? I probably should save this one as well. Out of order, but this one will be 2A. Lego Live. Yeah, very similar technique to that, I imagine. Yeah, no, I was blown away. That was really cool. Love seeing it. Love seeing a tool in production before it's even launched. Let me think. I'm just trying to check for questions. I don't want to miss any as they come. Thank you, Rune. Yeah, voxelizing stuff and then doing simulations is kind of like a drug. I agree. Anything that you can combine with simulations is always wonderful. I guess, here's some other little tidbits. So that's kind of layering up this way. Let's copy this into a new scene file. Same setup again, put that into a Voxel Mesher, put in a volume builder. Cool. That's all voxelized. Now, like I said, this shell is all its individual pieces. And I'm actually going to increase this interior range just to make sure it's kind of full all the way through. So we've got this hollow shell on the outside, but technically they're all still individual polygons. So if I wanted to combine them, we figured instead of us doing the calculation, you just throw into a connect object and set that to manual. And now it is properly welded. So now that we have that mesh, we can do all sorts of cool modifications on this just using the node modifiers. So I'm sure a lot of you know, because a lot of people don't know, but I'm sure a lot of you know because you watch my live streams. But if we move into the asset browser and go into something like the nodes dropdown, let's rearrange this to be a list and shrink down a little bit. And don't search. Okay, cool. So now we're inside the world of nodes, and you've got something called geo modifiers, and there's just a giant parametric list of a bunch of procedural, well, essentially modeling commands, but you can do them procedurally by using these. And you've got a bunch of the rocket lasso modifiers in here as well. Things like the electric spline modifier, the branch spline modifier, pulse, catenary, trim, like a ton of them have all been moved into the C4D, the newest version of C4D, which is really, really cool. But again, for anybody confused, that is not my plugins. Our plugins are still our own plugins, but the node capsules we made from Axon are now available to everybody in the newest version of Cinema. Okay, cool. Having said all that, we've got all these lovely modifiers. So I could do things like search. I'm going to do a lot of searching for this. I'm going to search for untriangulate. So here is the node based untriangulate. So if I drop that after the voxel mesher, I'm going to say I would like to create n-gons. And now look, it melts away all of that internal geometry parametrically. And now we just get those edges. Keep in mind the points that made up those edges, those are still there, but we were able to clean it up and get only this bit of geometry. So then if I were so inclined, let's search for an inset. Here's a procedural inset based on nodes. Drop that inside. And I'll say use islands and shrink it, not proportionally, but let's just say by 2. And I was able to inset every single one of those layers by 2, just like this. And actually, I'm going to modify my stack a little bit. I'm going to search for the word select and grab this node operator select and put that first. So I'm going to say select, kind of virtually, parametrically, select all the polygons. And now they're getting untriangulated. And then those are getting inset. And now that means I can search for the word delete. And after I inset, I'll delete. And because I made that initial selection, you see if I turn that off, it doesn't work. But if I make that selection, it does. Now I just get this outer shell. So now look, we've got this parametric voxelated outer shell. And we can always go back and modify the incoming stuff. Let's go and grab the original text and just say arcade T and boop. And it just automatically updates, more crazy procedural rigs all layered up on top of each other. And then, just, changing the order of operations here or changing the stack a little bit. Instead, let's say that, yes, we are selecting all, but this time we're not going to untriangulate, but we will inset. And you see the inset looks kind of funky in this case. But I'll say don't use islands this time. So now every individual one is getting inset. And then I'll say delete that out. And now completely different look. Again, entirely procedural. I could take that. Let's make it thinner. I'll grab my inset and say that these should be only 1 thick. And we grab this entire stack now, and I can throw that into a thicken. And we'll set that to be only 1 and set it to advanced. So it's kind of like hard edged. And now you see I've got this pretty much instant scaffolding set up that I can, again, layer, do whatever I want with. And it's entirely procedural. All perfect boxes creating this. Nikita, what if we model with multiple materials differently with different selection fields? Do we still need to bake the textures for it to work properly in the shader field? Well, I assume you mean in the shader field of Voxel Mesher. And the answer to that is that will actually work, but every time you add another selection tag, I've talked about this before, every time you make a selection tag, it actually adds quite a bit of information to need to be stored inside of Cinema. So like if you have one object that's like 1,000 polygons, but then you have 1,000 selection tags, it's almost like you've made 1,000 objects. So keep that type of thing in mind. But having said that, what's an easy way to show this? Because the plants are actually a terrible example. I guess for lack of, I'm just trying to think of a good way of doing this, of showing it easily. Honestly, it's boring, but let's just make a plane. I'll make a selection here, make it editable, and let's select, whatever. I'll just make a couple scribbles there, and let's right click other polygon selection. Oh, I guess I should have done that first, or I should have just said store selection, but now we just say update, and now that's my selection here. So if I were to make a material, and unfortunately it does have to be an old style material in order for it to read it procedurally. But let me show you. So I'm gonna hit, this is a weird way of doing it, but I want to make a standard material. The quickest way I can think to do that is open up your render settings, go to standard, double click, and now go back to Redshift. And now I was able to make an old style material. So now that I'm in this old style material, I could load in whatever I like. So let's say I'm just going to go into media, and I don't have a specific goal here. So what's under billboards? Nothing amazing. Gobos, Greebles, movies. Some of this pops out a little bit, not a lot, but I'll just drag in this stripy image and we'll make another material. Actually, I haven't specifically done this, but this is what sounds logical to me. Just trying to find something that looks kind of colorful. Give me something even worse. First thing that doesn't look. All right, a leaf. I'll grab a leaf. Good enough for me. So there's a duplicate, drag that in. Now there's a leaf material. So we got two different materials. So one is going to be applied everywhere, and then this other one, I'll drag it on, and that should be fed into the selection I've already got. So you see I've got two different UV maps. There's two different materials on there, one via selection tag, one not via the selection tag. So now let's feed this into the Voxel Mesher, and we'll make a volume builder. And you see it made it perfectly one thick. In theory, yeah, we could make it thicker if we want to, or we have just a single layer, which is working for our cases or for our purposes right now. If I activate a vertex color map, you see currently it's looking for a custom shader. So I could, in theory, just feed in like that leaf material and it's going to be translated directly. But that's not the only way we can access a material. If I say clear, you can see that under this, it's saying, well, it's looking for the custom, it's looking for a custom shader. Instead, I'm going to say you're actually looking for the color channel. And now it's looking for the color channel of every material. So essentially now we're stepping through and checking against every selection tag. And you can see now that I've got my two different selections. One is that gradient and the other is the leaf. I've got both multiple materials on the object. Here's the very, very important thing to note, though, is we could put multiple objects inside of my volume builder here and move them around, place them differently. I'm actually accidentally moving only some polygons there. So you can see I've got like a second layer here, and each of these is being calculated separately. They're doing their own thing. And this one could have different materials. In fact, why don't we invert the layout here? So you can see that these are now the opposite. So we can texture everything uniquely, but the Voxel Mesher can only look at the top level of the object. So if I put this plane, I don't know for sure, but if I put that plane, yeah, I think as soon as I put it into a null, it doesn't know how to read this complicated hierarchy. I know it's not super complicated, but the math to do this stuff is crazy. So as soon as I put this in, it doesn't know. Essentially, Voxel Mesher is manually, there's something we have to manually code in, is going down and finding the direct children and saying, okay, based on the direct children, how are the materials applied? So that is a limitation if you want to do this more complicated, base it off the UV map and have the materials placed on the object itself. Hopefully that was relatively clear. So yeah, multiple textures on different selections do directly work. And it's something we worked hard to make sure would work. But you know, for my money, most of the time I'm feeding in relatively straightforward objects in. So typically I am just feeding these through to be a custom shader and adding in my image directly. So you can grab the stripy one, or I can directly feed in the leaf one. So that's my preferred method, but we can read the color channel, or you can read the color or luminance or transparency or any of those color maps in a old style standard or physical material. Hopefully that answers it. Monthlies, yes, good to be back. And we should be on regular live streams for a little bit. I've got a trip in May, so I won't be around then. But we should be back on a regular stream. Next week will be a regular live stream where I'll just be taking questions about anything anybody wants to ask in the world of C4D and Mograph. So that should be super cool. And I'll be having guests. I know Winbush has already expressed interest in joining us, and he will be talking about Unreal. The first time he joined us, he was just starting to get into Unreal, and I threw some crazy questions at him, and now he knows it a lot better. So that'll be really exciting. So, you know, it won't be next week, I think, but because I'd like to get kind of a regular standard episode in before we have any guests. But yeah, if anybody has any suggestions for guests to have on as well, like feel free to throw those out, like send them to me on Patreon or via any of the social media platforms. Yeah. Okay, I might pop open another example file or two from the demos, but I think I'm just going to play that commercial one more time. I guess sprinkle it in as people come in and out of the stream, and I worked really hard on it, so it's fun to show off. So I'll be right back. Huzzah! Yeah, so very fun. Any questions that were in the animation, feel free to throw them out as we start to wrap up here. I'm going to jump into, let's see, Voxel Mesher, staging for launch, Voxel Mesher, example files. And let's see, did I make, well, this one's kind of fun. It's not really, I don't expect people actually do this workflow, but in that same way that I showed you how to build like the fall off and kind of procedurally do a fall off and say certain colors in one spot, certain ones in another. What I did in this one is I made a voxel mesher and then I made it editable. And then I made another copy of it. And now I'm just going to paint on one of them. So this one's been made editable. It's still visible, but I kind of hid it. I turn off the visibility here. But now if I double click on this color vertex map, every time you double click on a vertex color map, if you're on an object that has been made editable, it'll automatically go into this paint tool. And you can see I can just start painting. So I'm actually painting voxel by voxel here. So if I make my paintbrush really small, and I just kind of, zero in on a particular one, I can paint individual voxels. So yeah, if you did want to get in there, make a model, and then afterward make it make it editable and start painting on it, you also have that option. And you can do like a lot of fun things, just kind of messing around here, painting different paint streaks and I don't know, just layering stuff up. It's wacky, maybe not super practical, but maybe somebody will do something cool with it. So yeah, definitely go and check that out. It's a fun technique. Scaffolding, I kind of showed that off. Pyro does work, which is fun. This is just the most basic ever Pyro setup, but you throw Pyro in, it's going to take a second to initialize. And now we can return it as a voxel directly, and you see it doesn't even require the volume builder. It's just feeding out directly as a voxel mesher. We got the T-Rex, we got the spooky tunnel, flowering tree. We didn't really talk about we didn't do any plant stuff. I think we probably end up doing a decent amount of plant stuff next week, not with Voxel Mesher specifically, but just kind of showing off, because I think the branch spline modifier might be my favorite of all of the tools that we made for Maxon. And now that everybody has access to it, like, that's really exciting. I'd like to show it off more. What is this? No, that's not the one. Okay, I don't see the example here, so maybe we'll just make it a little bit from scratch. But I had made this cool, oh, actually you saw, I can scrub through it in the animation, which keeps on closing. So this one, where is it hiding? This one. So yeah, this one was really fun. And what's really cool here is I'm actually using Voxel Mesher a bunch of times, and we're using Voxel Mesher for the initial, let me see, scroll back. Do you see this initial like outliney text? I'm actually using Voxel Mesher for that. And then a different type of Voxel Mesher, we're using shell mode to make this outer shell, and that's automatically growing on. And then when it gets complete and this explodes outward, it's a third type of voxel mesher where it's actually clone mode converted to a cloner, and then we're exploding them out, and I'm just kind of seamlessly popping between all three modes. So that was actually really fun, just because I was able to layer up so many different voxel meshers. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to show you this kind of sketchy technique that I've been kind of talking about a lot lately. I talked about it a lot in my what's new, or my 50 minutes of tips and tricks for Maxon at NAB. So let's type in Arcade T. And again, I like just going for these beefy ones so we actually get some geometry to work from. A little bit thicker. Let's lay it down flat and make a voxel mesher. Plop it on in, convert. Okay, cool. So now we got these voxels. Now I showed you, I want to separate those out a little bit. So a little bit of horizontal spacing. So we could be really careful. I could scoot these around. I could get the right scaling. We could increase our resolution. We could decrease our resolution. Any one of these sizes could be fine. But yeah, that's pretty much working for me. So now what I'd like to do is probably plop this into, let's pop this into the connect object. So they're all welded together, and we'll do manual. And now I'm actually going to combine this with a different Rocket Lasso plugin, and that is Mesh to Spline. So let's make a Mesh to Spline. And I've been using this so much lately. With Mesh to Spline, we can either feed an object in directly, and now you see it's converting it to splines. Is now a spline object. It consumed what we were feeding in. Oh, actually, you can see very clearly because of this layout, you can see that inner voxel. So that reminds me to go to my volume builder, grab my interior, and increase. And now It's just this outer shell. But this, actually, while we're in this mode, I'm going to grab this threshold and increase it. Even if we go like 1 degree, suddenly anything that was super duper flat disappears, and we only get these high contrast edges, which is pretty much what I want. But I don't want to erase out my original object. So I'll yank it out, and instead of consuming it, I will say link to it, and we will link to that object. Now I will temporarily visually hide it so we can still see this. Actually, I suppose I'll feed this into a sweep. Hold down Alt and hold down Shift, put it on the inside, shrink that down to 2. And now you can actually see this outline. And just for visual contrast, I'll make a material. And you know what? Let's just make it some like black ink here. And let's make this one lighter just to increase the contrast. Okay, cool. So now you can see I've got this parametric outline. Of course, we can make it. I could go and modify the text. Everything will update, and I've just got this lovely outline there. To speed it up, I'll grab my sweep and say don't show caps, because we're just not seeing them in this environment, and those caps actually take a lot of time to calculate. Now, a cool feature inside of, let me increase my steps here, make those a little bit rounder, and shrink it down a little. A cool feature inside of the mesh to spline is we can actually offset from the edge, so I can push this out a little bit further. So that pushes those out. And now you can use one of the newly public Rocket Lasso node modifier capsules. So think of it like a deformer, where if I click on my deformer dropdown in the newest version of Cinema, you should see now the branch spline modifier, break spline, catenary, electric, pulse, dash. Down here's a partition modifier. Oh man, next week we got to talk about the partition modifier. But I'm going to grab the electric spline modifier. And let's drop that as a child of the mesh to spline. And now you can see that all of these are essentially being made to look electrical. So if I hit play, you can see all of them being all electric, zapping all over the place. It's pushing out a little bit far, but I'm going to pull these in. And I'm just going to change a few settings here. I'm going to say I don't want to fade out on the edges. And right now we're displacing quite a bit, but I'm actually going to change this from FBM to Perlin noise. And now I can increase my noise frequency. So you see right now they're all kind of drifting uniformly, but as I increase it, they're going to get smaller and scribblier. So that's kind of what I'm going for. And now I don't need to deform too much, just like a little bit. Honestly, a little goes a long way here. So yeah, just some little wiggles to give those some life. And then we could speed this up as much as we want. Let's say like 500. And now you can see I get these lovely squiggly lines on top of it. And now not only are we getting a sketch and tune type look, but we're getting it right here in the viewport. So we have complete control over these lines via splines and whatever materials, and especially with the electric spline modifier. So I'm going to shrink these lines down really thin. And then in the electric spline modifier, there's a really cool setting called clone count. And as I increase that, it's actually going to replicate the line multiple times and return them more. There's now more of those being created. All of those layer up. Right now we're subdividing every 2. We can probably drop that down to 1. Yeah, it'll make it run faster. And yeah, now we get these electrical lines all layered up on top. A cool feature that I added in the electric spline modifier is I'm going to get rid of all my animation speed. So now it's static, which is kind of cool. They don't have to animate. And then there is the option to add a movement rate. So if I say, I don't know what is a good number, so I'll say 25. Now you can see instead of them just wiggling, now they're traveling along their line. Of course, those two things can combine on top of each other. Another thing to note is if we were giving it animation speed, there's a loop point we can set. So I can say, hey, loop every 91 frames. So you can see now when it crosses 90, there's no pop. It's a perfect looping animation. So also very, very fun. But animation-wise, something I like, personally with Sketch and Tune, I always liked when things look scribbly and the lines were wiggling all over the place. A lot of people are always trying to make them very precise, which, here you can see I can make these kind of static and they're going to be very, very precise. But I like when there's a lot of chaos in it. And so essentially what I want to do is say, hey, every once in a while, I want these to just completely pop to a new frame with no coherence between frames. So essentially I want to change the random seed. So you can see if I change the random seed, suddenly we're getting a completely different layout. So I built in a setting here called under seed called animate. And I can say every 3 frames, animate the seed. And now you can see that the seed is animating on all of them. And we just get that big pop. So if I give it some animation speed and that pop, then now, and let's even say, well, if I say every frame, then now it's just completely popping with no coherence. But yeah, we can say every once in a while, just pop, 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 pop to a new frame, and we get like all this like maximized randomness. So yeah, I love layering those up on top of each other. So yeah, look at these lovely scribbles there. We could push this out further from the mesh to spline. We can grab the electric spline. You can actually hit T for scale and scale this up and add chaos. And look at all these scribbles I'm getting on there now. We can grab this end side and make those thicker, so we get thicker line, thicker, beefier lines there. We could layer up and get layers of transparency on top of them. So yeah, playing around with these modifiers is super duper fun, and it plays really nicely, of course, on top of the Voxel Mesher here. Of course, this works really well here on top of the Mesh the Spline. It would work well on top of Ricochet. And Slicer is another really good example of like reasons you'd want to make a cut through something and then maybe get a scribbly line from that. So yeah, I mean, just because we make so many spline tools, there ends up being all these different use cases. We actually started work just a week ago on another spline tool, and I'm crossing my fingers. We want to make a very simple tool. Voxel Mesher was supposed to be like a 1 or 2 month plugin, and it turned into like a 1.5 year plugin. So we've got this very simple idea for a plugin that I do hope to come out with pretty quick, and it'll be a lot less fanfare. The goal will be it's going to be a lot cheaper, like it'll be like a $30 plugin, because it's relatively simple to make, and I won't be making a giant commercial, and I won't be making tons of tutorials. It'll be like, hey, here's the quick start video, and it should kind of cover everything because it's going to be a nice, straightforward, simple tool that I think people will get use out of. I mean, I know I will. And I really love the technique that we're using for it. But anyway, that's beside the point. Oh, I did. It should be RKT. I just totally mistyped it. RKT. Anyway, it just shows it's all procedural. It's all automatically updated. Thanks for noticing. Didn't even think about it. Yeah, Sage, you're right. That's what I'm saying. Crossing my fingers. Like, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Let's see. Oh yeah. Type Ogre. Yes, we did tackle giving the voxels textures. And yeah, I didn't specifically do anything like a Minecraft texture, but yeah, once we have this in the world of cubes, like that type of thing should kind of come pretty easily. Because yeah, well, the simple version, yeah, if Type Ogre you were here relatively late, at any point we can just drop this into a voxel mesher, click the button to make a volume builder. Now we get our final geometry. Let's put in that cube mode, convert to cloner, and now we're creating a point cloud that we're cloning onto. And now that we're in the world of clones, you could put different Minecraft blocks inside here, use the UVs from the cube, colorize things, like use a random effector, and I'll say give it random effector colors. And now, any colors are going through that we want to. And then those can be textured individually, or you can texture things directly on the voxel mesher itself. That's one of the reasons that in the voxel mesher we give out the dimensions, is that if you were to go into Photoshop, right now this is actually 21 by 21 by 21. So in Photoshop, if you made a texture that is exactly 21 by 21, you could then use our material, our texture overlay. If we go to cube, we could then do a texture overlay of the bounding box, and then you could perfectly texture those. Yeah. Something that's kind of cool. Let's see, where I gotta go back to an earlier file. Let's go back to the backflip guy. Something I didn't show, and not that it's important, but let's get rid of that cloner. But now we're texturing. This is in the point, when we're in the clone mode, it's showing as clones. But if you click on the point mode, you'll see that even the point cloud is getting those colors applied to it. It all depends on the angle we're viewing it. But yeah, you get the colors applied on top of it. So that even gives you feedback. Yeah, that covers most everything that I wanted to. Lots of different fun combinations here. This is using just a series of deformers. It might look like Pyro, but it's not. And I'm using just some different colors to layer it up and make it look all cool and textured. And we've got, what else do we have? That scaffolding, I kind of showed that. We got the spooky tunnel. This one's actually, I think this one's really fun because of the camera rig I have set up. But this one is essentially entirely procedural, where we are flying through this cave made from voxel, making, voxel mesher on a spline. And we're flying through the tunnel by traveling the spline. And I'm also using the branch. Actually, I made it editable because back then, when I made the file, branch spline modifier wasn't available to everybody. But we're actually branching off every once in a while. So it always feels like we're randomly choosing which path we're traveling down. And then I'm using these extra cameras to like calm the camera down. I mean, it still seems a little frantic, but if I go to the unmodified camera, you see how like crazy it is to like make these choices. But then I can modify the camera to like smooth it out, and then modify it again to add in a little bit of springiness on top of it, and just let it travel through the tunnels. So yeah, that's a fun one. But if we completely delink from it, you see that we're just traveling through this this series of tubes coming to you from a series of tubes. Cans, building bricks, showed that. Flowering tree, this one's kind of fun. So here I'm using the branch spline modifier and then feeding in separate layers and then eventually getting it all to be voxelized and, even texturing these individually. And it's actually a different technique, which we're kind of wrapping up right now, but maybe even next week we can spend a little time when I'm talking about I think a lot of the focus next week, I'll be answering people's questions, but a lot of our time will be spent talking about the Rocket Lasso modifiers that are built into Cinema now. And using those, that's how I did this. And we talked about using vertex maps to colorize Voxel Mesher, but this is actually using the splines themselves to colorize Voxel Mesher. So we get all sorts of like fall offs where we're traveling and changing colors as we travel the length of a spline. So I think that was kind of fun. I dig it. Base segment. Yeah, that all makes sense. Okay, any final questions? Your last chance to ask any questions about Voxel Mesher while it's still on sale. I suppose I should share the code one last time for everybody, because the absolute best way to support Rocket Lasso and to give yourself extra superpowers in the process is to pick up a Rocket Lasso tool. It is always appreciated. It's what's keeping the lights on here at Rocket Lasso. We could not develop this stuff if people are not buying them. And right now you get 15% off, or if you use the Patreon discount, if you're supporting on Patreon, you actually get a 25, actually it's like 27% off discount. Brawlius, unfortunately, this one is only compiled back to R25. And the reason for that is more so that we decided to be implementing a lot of features that are kind of newer in Cinema, where we have a lot of code that's dealing with Pyro, and we have a lot of code that is dealing with splines and with the parametric vertex maps and the color maps. There's one, and then we're also using fields, and there's a lot of things that changed a lot in Cinema, and it's almost impossible to make those backwards compatible. So we are going back, I think going back to R25 is going back like more than 4 years, but yeah, this one we just couldn't compile it back any further. And I did a big poll kind of asking everybody what versions they're on, and there was like one person that said in the poll, they were in R23 or older. So it just didn't seem like that's where the people are. So apologies for that, but it is what it is. All right, excellent. It doesn't seem like there's much in the way of questions. So I think I'm going to end this by just playing that commercial one last time, and then we can run the Patreon credits, which of course, if you're supporting on Patreon, I try and get your name here in the credits, which is also super duper appreciated. And like I said, I think our Patreon is going to be blowing up soon because I'm going to be trying to put a lot more stuff on there. That's a big aspirational goal of mine, is to do a whole bunch of stuff with that. But I think that is going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out for the very first episode of season 7 of Rocket Lasso Live. We're already 7 seasons in. This is absolutely crazy. I look forward to seeing everybody. Make sure you are following on the Slack channel. Head over to, I was listing all the things I have done since the break happened. And I also made a brand new RocketLassoLive.com. Manually had to go and re-put together everything, made a Squarespace site, kind of copied everything over. Hopefully everything is working. So you can head on over to RocketLasso.com. And there's still the community page that you can jump to and join the Slack channel. So Slack is a great place to follow. If you're on Twitch, you can click the follow button for free, and it'll send you an email when I go live. On Slack, there's a special live channel where I at the entire channel, so you know when I'm going live. And I'm also using Twitter and Blue Sky, where I'm also posting on there. Of course, you don't see that in your feed right away. But anyway, follow us on social media or Slack to get updates as to when we're going live. But we should be going live every week that I can, absolutely. But let's go and jump on into this commercial and say thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.